He puts the teeth in terror. Here's a look at the brand new Trick or Treat Studios Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3 Leatherface 1/6 scale figure. Trick or Treat Studios is proud to present the officially licensed Leatherface 1/6 scale figure from Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. The figure stands roughly 13 inches tall and includes 3 hands, a leg brace, plus highly detailed chainsaw accessory. While we may not have been gifted this Leatherface from the lady in the lake, it certainly does come to us from the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 Leatherface 1/6 scale figure, I'd like to thank the folks over at Tots that did provide this sample we could have a look at. The good news, though, is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 Leatherface and the earlier looked at TCM Part 2 Leatherface are available right now over on our site for $199.99. You can also as well pay 4 interest-free installments starting from $18.05 a month. The figure is going to stand, again, bigger than 12 inches. He's actually still about 12.5 inches in height, or the figure is about 31.5 centimeters tall. Starting these reviews in order of sequels, we first looked at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 Leatherface before jumping over to New Line's interpretation of him. Size-wise, even though Leatherface from Part 2 notably is taller, I think more of it is just because of the additional sculpting on the top of his hair. They seem, though, to be sharing the exact same bodies. And one idea I have in mind involves me also bringing in another comparison that we didn't do in the earlier review. Here's what the figure looks like with the Michael Myers from Halloween 6, The Curse of. Notably, though, in that movie, George Wilbur reprised his role, having already played Michael Myers in Halloween 4. One of the things, though, that resulted in George Wilbur being recast was they considered Michael Myers at the beginning of the film to be too stocky, too fat. I'm wondering, though, and maybe other customizers may also be doing the same idea, thinking the same thing, is now that we got this bigger build and a slightly oversized stomach, if maybe using then this body for a Curse of Michael Myers custom might be a better idea. I mean, obviously the body that we did get here was a stock body from the Curse of Michael Myers release. But to take the body here that we get from Leatherface, either one of them for that matter, and using them for a George P. Wilbur Michael Myers from Halloween 6 might in fact be a good idea. Well, maybe not being gifted to him by the lady in the lake. Ironically, the actor that played Leatherface in the trailer is completely different from the one that played him in the movie. In the trailer, he's actually played by Kane Hodder, the only actor I think that could actually go on record by saying he was not only Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, and also played Freddy Krueger. And before you think to yourself, well, when was he ever Freddy Krueger? He was actually the hand inside the glove that pulls Jason's mask down to the depths of hell at the very end of Jason Goes to Hell. Now, the actual chainsaw that he gets in the trailer is a lot shinier, obviously, than what we're getting right here. In the movie itself, it looks pretty close to this. Notably, though, it's a lot cleaner than perhaps the chainsaw that we get from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 that just got saturated and soaked in blood. This chainsaw is a lot cleaner. But, I mean, just to look at the differences of the blades, not only is it wider, but it's like, what, a fifth the length longer? And instead of actually being red, it's done here differently in kind of a yellow. Very similar, in fact, kind of to the off yellowish green one that he had in the 74 film, just obviously not this long. The details are nicely done here, though, on the side with the motor. The little pull string here doesn't actually pull, but it's a nice recreation of the chainsaw that he has in the movie. Of course, like before, he does have the proper hands to hold this. He does already have, now I haven't bothered to actually change the hands yet. I'm just going to leave them the way that they are. He does have a trigger hand already attached onto the end of his forearm. I'm just going to leave it as it is right now. But he does also have a hand that's holding, just if you want to have him holding the handle, a pretty dirty, grimy looking hand as well. A funny thing, we've just obviously looked at recently we just looked at Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 Leatherface, and all the hands that he has are all on the same side as this one. They only swap out with this side of the figure's body. The other hand, I guess they just decided that a gripping hand would be fine and good. I think it's fine and good, because obviously he can hold the chainsaw perfectly fine. To have him hold the chainsaw, by the way, it's just a case again of, now you will want to be careful with this one because this is a much longer blade than the one that we looked at before, but this just basically fits in his hand. And with the elbow bending the way it is, you can have the figure just wielding it in one hand, or again, you can just bring the hand around. The benefit of these figures, though, is that they have nice tight joints. So you can take the hands and just fit that around his handle. I will say, though, getting his hands around the handle of this chainsaw were a lot easier than doing the same with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 Leatherface. But that's what he looks like with the chainsaw. I will, though, when it comes to displaying these guys on the shelf, even though I don't have any real issues with the feet. One of the problems I had with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 with the cowboy boots was they were using harder plastic. Because the way that they've designed his feet this time around, they're actually more flat. So it's a lot easier to get this guy to stand without any problems whatsoever. Let's get the chainsaw out of his hands. Now, those are, again, only represent all of the accessories the figure comes included with. Whereas the one before had 2 sets of interchangeable hands. This guy only has one extra hand, a totaling of 3. And, of course, his trusty chainsaw. The one thing he also has that you probably already noticed right now, looking at strangely, is he does also have an apron. He does have an apron, but for most of the time that we actually see him in the movie, he's actually just walking around with his shirt and tie. The actual maybe explanation as to why the apron is so clean is just because most of the time we don't actually see him walking around this in the movie. It does have a pocket there on the front. There's a little pocket there on the top corner. Ultimately, though, I'm just going to be removing it. I decided to wait and hold off removing until we actually got into the review of him, because I know I wouldn't be able to tie a knot as easy as they did on the back here. So we're just going to untie this, because my plan is really just to do this, just to take this off altogether, and then just have the figure displayed personally without the apron. Now, if you wanted to leave the apron on, you can. I prefer, though, this version of Leatherface. It's about like the only Leatherface I would really ever display on the shelf, other than Pretty Woman, of course, without actually having an apron. Now, one thing that's interesting about this Leatherface is that the designing of his head sculpt isn't maybe as creative as what we got with Savini, but it's still a really interesting head sculpt. Funny, though, also enough, is with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, it was the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that I actually saw before I had to kind of work backwards, watch the original 74 after that, and then I watched part 2. But I think I remember, from what I remember at least, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 was the first TCM movie that I actually saw. Now, whereas Savini had designed the first mask, K&B Effects actually was the one that designed the mask this time around. I think the idea in mind was that he was suffering from syphilis. So he had basically eaten away areas on his face. And you can kind of see a little bit of that reflected in the way that they designed the mask and the face underneath it. Notably, he has sort of that sneer there. One of the notable traits about this version of Leatherface. He has much longer hair, too. Instead of having the hair kind of more back, this version of Leatherface kind of sports it with a little bit more further down in the front. He has the blood there on the front of his face. A really nice sculpted face, though. I would say that maybe the mask is a little bit too dark when you compare it to the movie. I think it's a little bit lighter, but I mean, obviously, it depends on really when you jump in and see him in the film. It gets notably a little bit darker. I mean, obviously, it gets a lot more blood all over him and the rest of his shirt as well, which, like, this shirt, to its credit, is actually pretty clean. There's a few little grimy, kind of dirtied areas where there's sweat, dirt, and whatever else that would have settled on the surface of the material. He's got some of it there on his sleeve there as well. But, for, again, to display this guy, even though I do like the idea that they included the apron, probably not going to decide to display him with it. Just, it makes more sense for me, at least, to display him without it. Once again, like Leatherface always has himself really creative-looking ties. The interesting thing about his tie, if that's the intended idea, was his tie actually looks like it's made of little tiny chomping teeth. See the teeth, the top and the bottom, and then the tongue in the middle? I think that's what's supposed to replicate or represent, but I do like the idea that the tie looks like that. The tie and the shirt are kind of kept to really, really dark browns, a very different contrast to what we got with part 2, where you had the shirt, the tie, and the white tie, and obviously the black shirt. I really like the look of this one. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the fact that with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, it's like the first one that I saw. So maybe that for that reason alone, I have a little bit more attachment to this design of character. I mean, take it with a grain of salt. I'm also the same guy that also likes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Next Generation. But he, once again, is using that bigger, bulkier body. Slightly thicker arms. Now, I will say, though, about the arms on mine is that they were a little on the looser side. You can kind of see there in the shoulders. Once you get to about that point, it isn't so much an issue. But even just to bring the arms out a little bit, I noticed that, at least on mine, they're a little looser in the shoulders. But the tailoring is really good on the shirt. Again, he's got little pockets there on the sides. Well tied up tie, too. They didn't just phone it in. They actually did do a tie. They, in fact, actually did a better tying up of a tie than I would be able to do. For a long time, I hate to admit it, I was using clip-on ties just because I can't tie a tie to save my life. But overall, it's a good-looking head sculpt. Using, again, that darker colored body, what we already got introduced from before with the part 2, they're using, again, that same darker molding here for, again, more now the visible arms where we didn't get as much the chance to see it. But you can see, there's a much more muscular arm. And, again, one of the reasons why I was kind of thinking it might be an ideal body build to use maybe for, the George Wilbur Michael Myers. Just because, again, he's a little bit fuller in the stomach here. And again, this isn't padding either. This is a fully sculpted body. If you did want to see what it looked like completely opened up, it was a lot easier to pull off with part 2. I had actually opened up the shirt so you guys could see what it looks like. But this is all sculpted as one brand new piece. And one of the main reasons why these figures are a lot heavier than the Michael Myers figures that they'd done before. This is all now sculpted in stomach. And you can see how much further out this sticks out. It does make for a much heavier looking figure. One of the things that also notable about Leatherface in part 3 is that he has himself the leg brace. This was a worry that I thought I was going to have when it came to displaying the figure, because I thought if I was to bend like his knees, for example, how much give is there going to be from the leg brace? Well, if I can bend the knee, you can actually see there's a hinge right there on the corner of the leg brace attaching the top to the bottom. And then, of course, that's strapped around the tops and bottoms of his legs. But it seems to go well, actually, with the hinging of the knee. To bend even like the knee, it doesn't seem to be the case. Like the leg brace goes along with it. So that's one relief that I don't even have to worry about anymore. And for this figure, he also has himself like the hiking boots. Again, being that they're flat feet figures. Obviously, this one's going to be staying a little bit better than the earlier looked at cowboy boots on the part 2. A much flatter foot, I don't have to worry as much that the figure's going to have balancing issues. But for the figure's articulation, it's pretty much going to be the exact same as part 2. So the head's going to be on a ball joint. Yes, it could, for all intents and purposes, rotate all the way around. I mean, that would obviously just kill Leatherface. Head looks down about that far, and it looks up, and you can also move it back and forth. Again, there's not going to be as much going on here for the torso. Yes, there's still a swivel back and forth. You will probably be untucking his shirt in the process, but there's not much that you can really do with it. There's no crunch here at the top where his pectorals. This does almost feel as if they're a separate piece, but moving this around, it doesn't look like it's separate from the rest of his body. It might just be the case that I'm actually feeling his under pectorals here. I don't think. Like there's a line right there, but it doesn't feel as if it independently moves from everything else. As for his arms again come out easily at 90 degrees. You can take those arms, move them forward, move them back. He has not so much a swivel here. I may have actually said he had a swivel when we looked at the part 2. He doesn't seem to have a swivel here, but he does have certainly a swivel in his elbow. He also has a single hinge, it seems, only in his elbow, and the hands do rotate all the way around. Legs do split. Now, if you had seen my earlier review, they're a little on the more squeakier side, and it seems as well that they've also incorporated brand new ratcheted joints, something that wasn't done before with their Michael Myers. There's a mild swivel there at the top of the thigh. Figure has also a double hinge on the knee, which would be easier to pull off on showing you guys on this side rather on the hinge joint on this side, just because, again, it's only pegged on both sides. I don't want to double bend just in case that's going to be the thing that dislodges these. I don't want to have these separate off on me, but yeah, he's got a double hinge on the knee. And then when he has the ankle articulation, this is one thing that this figure does a little bit better than the part 2, because you can actually move his ankle back and forth. You can also rock it back and forth a little bit better as well. Nice looking figure though. Whether you feel you may not like, honestly, you may not like part 3. Again, for me, getting introduced to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, it was actually with Leatherface part 3. And I like the look of this character. Again, when you're comparing him, say, for example, to part 2, it's just also personal preference. Some people didn't really even like part 2 design of Leatherface. I might go back to like the slaughter mask that he has, or even the Pretty Woman as the definitive look for Leatherface. But, for really what they're doing here, like Trick or Treat Studios has taken a property like Texas Chainsaw Massacre that really, for all intents and purposes, have sat in limbo for so long. There hasn't really been any companies out there wanting to produce, having been able to produce action figures or collectibles based on the movie franchise, like they had done so successfully with the Halloween franchise. They're now picking up, of course, the reins when it comes to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We got a fantastic looking Leatherface from part 2, an equally impressive figure from also part 3. Whether you decide to display the figure with or without his apron, I choose myself just to leave it off, because again, like most, if not the majority of the film, he's usually seen without it. In Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Leatherface was portrayed by R.A. Mihailoff. Wasn't the same actor that was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. That was Bill Johnson, and it certainly wasn't the OG Gunnar Hansen. Gunnar Hansen apparently wanted to be in part 2, part 3, and I think even Next Generation, but for what the actor was going to be getting paid, I think the director was going to be underpaying him. He decided to pass on the role, which is really a shame, because it would have been nice to have Gunnar Hansen reprise his role of Leatherface in all the subsequent sequels, even the dismal Next Generation. He did, though, come back for Texas Chainsaw 3D, but by then, of course, nobody really wanted to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. I was a big fan of Chainsaw 3D, even though I know a lot of people think it's absolute garbage. As for the actual figure, though, of Leatherface, I think he's nicely recreated once again by the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios. The detailing, all the way from the top of his mangly-looking face mask down to the bottom of his leg brace, all captured perfectly. The chainsaw, notably, I think probably could have been painted a little bit shinier than just relying on the gray plastic for the blade. And of course, this blade, unlike the one that we looked at earlier for Texas Chainsaw 2, is cleaner. I mean, it doesn't have blood at all anywhere on this. Now you can choose obviously to display the figure with or without the apron. I'm opting for the latter. Even though the apron is a nice included accessory, it will be ultimately going back into the tray in favor of what I feel to be the better look to Leatherface, as we mostly see him mostly in the movie just with his shirt and tie. Now this guy is available, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 Leatherface we looked at from before, for $199.99. As it is right now at the time of doing this review, the figures are still currently in stock. If you guys wanted to get your hands on these and a big fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they are, like I said, in stock. You can click the link down below in the video description. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios that did once again provide the sample of the brand new Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 Leatherface that we could have a look in this review. For your video question, as I didn't pose this in the earlier review, what's your favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre film? 74? Is it Part 2? Perhaps it's even Next Generation? Okay, nobody's going to say it's the Next Generation. But what's your favorite? Let me know down below in the comment section. And certainly if you guys wanted to be on board, because we are going to still be looking at the remake Leatherface in the upcoming review. First of all, if you like this video, I want to throw it a like. Do me a solid. If you guys want to stick around for more, hit the subscribe button down below. Yes, turn on the bell notification. And the most important thing is that you're coming back here regularly. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.